we now have the former director of the CDC saying, we think this was an intentionally created virus. Not that they intentionally leaked it, but that was certainly a risk if they intentionally created it, that was the risk they created.
Robert Redfield, who was the former director of CDC, you remember him through a lot of those briefings and congressional testimony, and he basically told Sanjay Gupta, I'm going to tell you how I think this started.
Normally when a pathogen goes from a zoonotic to human, it takes a while for it to figure out how to become more and more efficient in human-to-human transmission. I just don't think this makes biological sense.
So in the lab, do you think that process of becoming more efficient was happening? Is that what you were suggesting?
Yeah, let's just say I have coronavirus that I'm working on. Most of us in the lab, we're trying to grow a virus. We try to help make it grow better and better and better and better and better and better so we can do experiments and figure out about it. That's the way I put it together.
He doesn't buy this idea that that all of that could stem from a single bat and a single person that could create a worldwide pandemic, that in his opinion, it came from the lab. He doesn't say it was intentionally done. He said that it's very common, and he's a virologist, that it's very common that people who work on these viruses end up that somebody there ends up getting infected by it, and then they would be the ones spreading it.
We know they operated this lab, and we know that they were engaged in research on these kinds of viruses. And we know that they've had trouble securing viruses in their labs before. In 2003, we know they leaked with respect to SARS. So they are not world-class when it comes to securing viruses in their laboratories.
It's really remarkable that this is even considered a controversial theory. I mean, when an airborne virus originates next door to a lab that studies that very thing, of course, the very first thing that you would investigate and rule out is that it originated in that lab. It's sort of Occam's razor. That's the most likely scenario.
China has engaged, in my judgment, in a cover-up. I think if we examine, for instance, satellite photography of Wuhan as far back as October and November of last year, you can see that the hospitals, the parking lots in Wuhan were overwhelmed.
If you look at intent issues or negligence, both of those are actionable globally under global legal system institutions.
Under international law, whether it's intentional or whether it's negligent, however it may have originated, what the intent was, whether it was a nefarious intent, which I happen to believe it was, whether it was negligence, whether it was just a mistake or an accident, all those are adjudicatable in a tribunal in the international sphere.
Say that it was for a good purpose and that it was accidentally released. The fact that the Chinese government instituted a domestic travel ban but not an international travel ban, even if everything they did up to that point, Jay, was on the up and up, which I think is a big stipulation. But even if you grant that move alone, not stopping international travel while stopping domestic travel, Jay, they would have to be held to account for that.
Because they failed to warn. There is a theory in law, particularly tort law, called failure to warn, and they had an affirmative obligation, I would argue, they should have warned the entire globe about the effects of this virus.
Wish that the Chinese Communist Party was capable of sharing this information in the world, but you all know this, right? Just like with Chernobyl, just like with communist regimes all along, they close down, they disappear people who have the information that could help the world solve this serious problem.
If you created it intentionally in the lab and you couldn't secure it, and you've already been found, SARS, same kind of thing, where you could not secure these viruses, so you have no business doing this. Then you've done it again, there can be serious consequences if the world wants there to be.